So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the very first Green Capital Partnership quarterly gathering in the year that Bristol is European Green Capital. It's amazing, isn't it, to think that 8 years ago, when only a few people came together, and now the partnership has reached numbers of over 750 member organisations. So it's amazing to think what has been achieved. But I guess what we're all about at the partnership is how do we create a low-carbon city with a high quality of life for all. So today it's all about legacy starts here. So as you can see, there's a packed agenda here. We're going to hear from Chris Wilmore, who's the Director of Undergraduates here at Bristol University, Liz Zeidler, Chair of the Green Capital Partnership, George Ferguson, Mayor of Bristol, and Andrew Garrad, Chair of Bristol 2015. So I'm really pleased to welcome everyone to the Bristol Student Union. This is the very first time that I've been here in daylight. And it's pretty, and it looks absolutely amazing, especially considering it's with the renovation. So I'd like to now hand over to Chris Wilmore, Director of Undergraduate Education, to tell us a little bit more about what they're doing here during the Green Capital Year.
Thank you. I'm here to welcome you to this newly refurbished building and to do a quick plug for it to say, if you're looking for a venue to hire in Bristol for an event, the Student Union building is now the place to hire. It's fantastic eco-credentials and it's a really nice venue. I want to speak briefly about legacy and what the two universities think they're doing engaged in 2015. And I say the two universities because UWE and the University of Bristol are very much in it together. They're sitting in front of me around the same table. And that in itself is a really important statement for everybody. We're in this together. Okay, we've got great research credentials, both of us. Okay, our estates are making commitments. Bristol University's estates are committing to becoming carbon neutral as a university. Not quite tomorrow, but certainly within my lifetime. But what I want to speak briefly about is the students. Because the single biggest impact those two universities have is on the people that we send out the door. Thousands of people leave our two universities every year with a lifetime of footprint ahead of them. And it's really important to us that they're going out with the knowledge, skills and values that mean they're going to make a positive difference all over the world. Far more difference than we can individually make ourselves. They're out there as our stormtroopers. So both universities are committed to fundamental changes in the curriculum to ensure that every student encounters sustainability in their curriculum. But more than that, that they encounter it in terms of doing stuff. And that's what the slide's about, and that's what I just want to speak briefly about. The two universities have jointly been given £250,000 by HEFCE for this year. And HEFCE have said, do what you need to do, but show you can mobilise 100,000 hours of student volunteering for sustainability in the city. And that sounds an absurd amount until you realise that 10% of the population of this city are students at one or other of those two universities. That is an enormous asset. We know from what we've been able to do so far with things like UBU Get Green that there is a huge student appetite for engagement, and what we're being funded to do is to deliver on that. But importantly, we've been told, don't just deliver 100,000 hours this year. That's great, that's fun, but it's ephemeral. What matters to HEFCE, and the reason why they've given us the money, is to work out how we build that sort of long-term partnership. So not just this year will 100,000 hours of student time be put into sustainability in the city, but in every year going forward, there will be that level of student mobilisation. And we've already got amazing things happening. There's students out doing energy surveys for local firms. There's a project called Briz Bikes that's working with the prison and with Lifecycle to do a sort of Bristol version of Boris Bikes. There's a Nittyversity, which is a group of students who set up who are making things to assist people who are homeless. But it's also challenging us. So one of the things they're doing is there's a student action group on divestment. There's a divestment campaign. This is not going to be easy for us as a university or for anybody. Part of the price we pay for being engaged in this is that we're going to be challenged and we're going to have to change. And I'm pleased to see that part of the 100,000 hours of work, it includes students campaigning to make me change what I do and to make the university change what we do, because that's an important part of it. Now, I hope that at the centre of our thinking about the year is not merely what we do this year, but how we make that itself sustainable into the future. And that we think as much about making people change agents, empowering them to be the difference and to convince others to be part of the difference, as about the physical things that we may do and we may transform. But for our students, to empower them to deliver that 100,000 hours, they need your help. And so I'm going to end with a plea. If your organisation is not yet working with the students of one or other university, please either look at the leaflet that's on your table that talks about how to get engaged, or go and see the people on the end table who will now wave, who will connect you to students who want to work with you and help you in whatever you're doing on the sustainability journey. I hope we have a good afternoon and get some good ideas from you about our shared legacy.
Thanks very much, Chris. Next, I'd like to invite up to the stage Liz Zeidler, who's the chair of Green Capital Partnership.
I was going to abandon this, but I'm going to go the sensible route. Hi, everybody. Fantastic to see you all here. It really, really is. Always a joy to see both familiar faces and lots of unfamiliar faces. It's a real delight to be here. Gary and I were the development manager for the partnership. We're talking the other day about the sort of the sea change in mood, if you like, in the conversations we're having around the city from last year. Last year, I think many of you came to our different quarterly partnership gatherings, which we held at different parts of the city, north and south and east and west. And there was a real focus in the city on what are we going to do in 2015? How can we set up a project? How can we get some funding? It was very, very much about doing on the ground, which was very exciting. But actually, almost as the new year turned over, people started talking much, much more about the legacy. What's going to happen after this? How can we do it this year in a way that really makes a change in the long term? What do we need to put in place now to make sure that's a reality? So we felt it was quite important not to wait to have a legacy quarterly partnership gathering at the end of the year, but to start right now, which is what we're doing. And we're delighted to have so many of you here to share on that conversation. We are going to be asking you to have some conversations about what that means to you later on, but we wanted to set a little bit of context around that, about how we build for the future. So, like every legacy, it's got a backstory. And in terms of the Green Capital Partnership's legacy role in turning this city into that sustainable city that Nina just described, many of you know a little bit about that prior backstory. It started with a very small pioneering group. One or two of you, I think, are in the audience now, back in 2007. It became a growing network through the city, facilitated and supported and resourced a lot by the City Council. That growing group supported debate and seed-funded some projects and did quite a few different things around the city. In fact, it gave birth to some of those projects that many of you run and manage now. It also, I think, importantly, had a successful focus on winning the European Green Capital. It had a big role in creating the circumstances under which we would win it, but also in helping to put that bid process together on all three occasions that we went forth for it. Since that time, it's really extended its reach. As Nina mentioned, we're now over, I think, 770. Every time I see you all, it grows, which is very, very exciting. Those members range from huge corporations and big businesses right down to tiny little community groups and everything in between, including the university, the City Council and public bodies. We've been expanding the activity of the partnership and certainly expanding the opportunities for collaboration. And the last year has been really inspiring on that front. An awful lot of new collaborations have been born from some of the opportunities that the partnership's been able to create to allow people to do that. We've also become an independent CIC. We're out on our own. We're in a growing up journey, I think, at the moment. You know, we've gone from being very much under the wing of the City Council to stepping out as newly independent, going through our teenage years, I like to think of as a mother of some teenagers myself. So a lot has gone on to get here, but now we have a new role emerging for the partnership and for all of those in the partnership and in this sector who share this vision for the city. Now, some of that context that I mentioned is not just about Bristol. It's not just about the partnership. Cities, I think many of you will know, are increasingly being seen as the sort of global unit of governance, economy and social change. They are pivotal. There doesn't seem to be an expert in the world who doesn't recognise that cities are absolutely pivotal to the change that we need to see in the future. It's believed that about 75% of the world's population will live in cities by 2050. That's a very, very important figure to remember. They're pivotal to all elements of how we move forward in tackling big issues like climate change. And I think it's important that in that context we need to remember that the debate isn't... It says here it's about future cities, not about insulation depth. We're not suggesting for a moment that insulation depth isn't important, and those practical tasks, of course, are vital. But actually, the real legacy of this city is about that sea change, about how we run cities in the future. It's about complexity in systems and about how those complex systems of economy and governance and civil society, how do they work together better? How can we really change the framework in which we're working? And the future for the Green Capital Partnership has to be in helping to build that capacity, in acting particularly in that civil society space. How can we support that complexity to create interconnectivity? How can we help the solutions that are out there in our wonderful, complex city to come together to really, really solve those bigger challenges and create a much more joined-up response across that diversity? And I'm passionate about the diversity in this city and about the opportunities for diversity to create the solutions that we need to see. I think the important piece for me about all of this context is that collaborative cross-sector approach is not a nice to have. It's an absolutely essential part of the solution that we need to create. And if we do embrace that kind of way of working, then we will achieve what we want to achieve faster and create deeper and more lasting change. I wanted to broaden out with a few quotes from people who've got some interesting things to say about this world. I've just left my books over there, but luckily they're on the screen, so I don't need to show you the books, but I've got them if you want to look at them. So Leo Hollis has written a book called Cities Are Good For You, and he said in 1994, P.J. O'Rourke calculated if the world's population were gathered together in one place with the same density as Manhattan, everyone on Earth could live in the former Yugoslavia. Today, the world's population might need slightly more wriggle room. I certainly need a bit more wriggle room than when I've been in Manhattan. But it would still need no more than Nicaragua. Therefore, living together in a clouded place is clearly not the problem. How we live and how we are allowed to live together is what matters most. And I think that's an important thing for us to bear in mind as we have the conversations today about legacy, that it's not necessarily about where we live, although we're passionate. I know everybody in this room is passionate about the city in which we live, but it's about how we live. How do we broaden that context? How do we find the courage? Because we need to be brave to radically reshape how we manage and support city-scale development if we're going to bring about that legacy that we want to see. This is another quote, which I think is a really important element about the power of the collective. Naomi Klein talks about this in the book, This Changes Everything. Germany's programme mirrors one implemented in Denmark in the 1970s and 80s, which helped switch more than 40% of the country's electrical consumption to renewables. And roughly 85% of Danish wind turbines were owned by small players, like farmers and co-ops. The best track record for spurring renewable energy turnarounds in the world. It's communities, co-ops and farmers working within an ambitious, well-designed national framework. And that tells us a lot, I think, about the power of the collective, about how you can create change through that civil society movement, as long as it's alongside clear and enabling governance. We're not pretending that governance isn't very important at a national or a local level. It's absolutely vital. But actually, how can we all play our part in that, and how can we be enabled to do that? the partnership is really excited about releasing that kind of latent capacity of the city to deliver some of those new models. We're already seeing it in small pockets, in the sorts of groups that some of the people I can see in front of me now are helping to run around the city. But how can we harness that and really move it forward? Those new models of development, even if they're small and sometimes hard to see and sometimes even hard to grasp because they might be a bit ahead of their game, they need to be nurtured. They need to be resourced. They need to be encouraged. They need to be enabled. And this example that Naomi Klein shares, shows that it's not only possible, but it's also the fastest and most dynamic way of achieving that change that we want to see. So we want to look at how can Green Capital Partnership and all of its members help to assist that to happen. The final quote I wanted to share was from one of 2015's sponsors. I actually promise you it wasn't a sort of particularly, they didn't ask me to do this. I think we've got some KPMG people here today, but they've written a report called Magnet Cities, in which they say that city government alone cannot reposition a city. It also takes the city's business leaders, opposing political parties, academics and educational leaders, investors, community groups and residents to buy into the need for change. This holds equally true for cities not in crisis, but hoping to further increase their magnetic pull. I mean, I think that quote tells its own story, but it's about the power and the role of civil society when it's harnessed for the collective good, and that when is an important element of it. That list up there on the screen is very well represented in this room. I know there are people in all of those categories in front of me now, and the opportunity is here at hand, and I genuinely think Bristol's got a real global opportunity here to be creating that sort of model for cities. How can we collectively find new and exciting ways to bring different parties together to make that opportunity real? And where better to do that than in Bristol, and when better to do that than in 2015? And the collaborative working that we've helped support over the last 12 months has already led to thousands and thousands of projects, some of which have successfully received funding through the 2015 process, but many of which, with or without funding, are going ahead through that power that is there to be harnessed. And what that's shown us, I think, the sheer number of those things over the last year has shown us that the latent demand for this sort of activity and this sort of opportunity to pull things together is huge. It's really, really huge and exciting in this city. But of course, if that demand is going to be properly serviced, it needs the support, it needs the resources, it needs a set of services that can support the demand to become a reality. And the real legacy is taking that opportunity and making it real. Bristol, we believe, is uniquely placed to offer this sort of model to the world. Many people in this room work on an asset-based development approach, and asset-based is the only way to go, really, in terms of making a difference. And Bristol has so many assets that we really, really need to be working on. It has got the most incredible amount of grassroots activity. I don't need to tell anybody in this room that. There are an amazing number of businesses and corporates who are interested in this work. Over 60% of our members are businesses, large and small. There are many national and globally leading organisations in the city. We've got to use that opportunity, the strength and the wisdom in those organisations better. There are exceptional leaders. There are nearly 200 of them here today, but there are many more outside. And there is a real appetite for change. We need to create the sort of legacy, the exceptional citywide collaboration through a newly refurbished, newly launched Bristol Green Capital Partnership that is able to co-create this exceptional opportunity for the city. We think the partnership's in an incredible place to do that. It has got that history, but it's also got enough people within it, enough power within it to create that diversity that we talked about. Later on this afternoon, we're going to have an opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about what sort of roles we feel the partnership can play and what that might look like on the ground and how you can help co-create it with us. I'm just going to mention them now just to give you some context, but we're asking for your input onto this later on. If our legacy role is to really galvanise and support civil society leaders to really make a difference to the activity levels in the city, but also to how those activities create and develop lasting and deep change for the city, then we think we have three key roles, amongst others. I'll go into much more detail later on. The first one is engagement. How can we engage both those who are already engaged to be engaging in a much, much deeper and more collaborative and more connected way, but also how can we engage new people? It isn't good enough to just talk to ourselves. It absolutely isn't. It's absolutely key that we reach out. We create opportunities for everybody in this city to get engaged, and the partnership is 100% committed to that. We need to be connecting up the activity of those who are engaged and those who want to be engaged. We need to be communicating better the plurality of the voices in this city so that we can have informed decision-making and informed activity going on. We need to provide more events and more opportunities to support bigger thinking, deeper action, and more connected change. We also need to be building capacity. We need to be brokering resources. We need to be finding more funds, sharing skills, finding opportunities to share training opportunities, use the research capacity in the city and create real opportunities for people to make meaningful collaborations. We want to be offering more project support so that those kinds of projects that are emerging, that are partner projects, that are really collaborative projects, are given the kind of support they need. And we need to be offering some shared services. There are multiple tiny organisations across this city trying to change the world and having to have all of those services of their own. How can we create connected spaces where people can share those services, reduce their costs and support each other in making a much more joined up impact on the city? And finally, we need to be creating an opportunity for really, really profound sectoral voice in the city. Creating opportunities where some of those different sectoral leaders can come together, they can think through that collaborative planning process so that systemic change really, really happens. It's not just a little bit here and a little bit there, but actually those pieces come together and really make sense and add huge breadth and depth to the city council's work and other governance work in the city. We need to create thought-led action, not just information-led. So that for me, the legacy of the Green Capital Year is about harnessing this power, harnessing the power of our diverse strengths to multiply and accelerate the change. I know that we in the Bristol Green Capital Partnership core team are really, really excited about what's going to be happening this year to help for us to be able to support all of you to help make that change together. And we're looking forward to hearing your voices on that later in the programme. In the meantime, I would very much like to welcome Mayor George Ferguson to the stage to tell us a little bit more about City Council's vision for the legacy of the 2015 year, what they're doing and how we can help.
Thanks, Liz. This room brings memories rushing back to me from the 60s when it was a brand new building built by Alec French Partnership, and David Mellor is here, but he wasn't to blame. And it was a great place for Bristol. And I do congratulate the university and the union for having now made it into a building for another 50 years. In a way, at that time, I thought the sooner it comes down, the better, but sorry, David. But now I see that it was a much better thing to reuse the resources we've got, and that probably is the best theme we can have for Bristol, is to make the best of what we've got. So thank you very much, Liz. Thanks, Chris Wilmore, earlier. And I just think that what the universities are doing with the city is such a good story. The fact that our universities and the city are working so closely together, and the volunteering teams, both in Bristol and in Bristol generally, and the university are coming together under the Cities of Service project. And I would add that I have, under pressure from one or two councillors on Bristol City Council, but with 1 minute's thinking about it, made quite sure that the city divests of any fossil fuel investment, just so that we can keep up with the university as well. Anyway, at the opening event, I thanked you all quite rightly for getting us to where we are. And I said that it's not so much, Bristol is made such a good city, not so much by its leadership, but by the individuals and the organisations and the communities within it that make it such a special place. And the Green Capital Partnership is the manifestation of that. And I think we've got here because of the Green Capital Partnership, and what's going to be interesting is how we get there in the future because of the Green Capital Partnership. There's a massive role for what has now become the best partnership of its sort in the world. And you may find that a surprising statement, but I honestly cannot find anywhere else that has got anything like the level of partnership around environmental projects as we have in Bristol, and that applies to Stockholm, Copenhagen, and Freiburg, or anywhere else you like to think of as the greenest city on earth. We may not be the greenest city on earth, but my goodness, we've got the basis for making ourselves so. I used to be one of the agitators, and now I've gone over to the dark side, but I have an appreciation for agitation. I think that agitation is really important, so I don't ask you to necessarily come peacefully, although I don't want war. I know that there are always issues, and one of the biggest issues we have at being green capital is that you set your sights really high, and that any single issue that doesn't somehow meet those high sights then becomes a reason for crying greenwash. And that has happened in every single green capital. So we're not alone in that. But I just ask all of us to set our sights on the big picture, realizing that on the way there are going to be a few challenges. We talk about legacy. Legacy to me is the money I'm not going to leave to my children. So I think we need to think of a word or a term that we can all gather around. It is about the future city. What sort of future city do we want, and how do we get there? My guiding principle in everything I do is about making us a healthy city. So if we make ourselves a healthy city, if we make ourselves a city that people want to come and see how things are done, if we make our city a city that we feel absolutely safe in bringing our children up in, so it's safe and healthy, then we're making a city that everybody will want to contribute to. It shouldn't be about hair shirt. It should very much be about having a sense of fun. And sometimes that is misinterpreted as seeing that it is all about the fun and not about the environment and the doing and the change. But actually, I think that's a really important part in bringing people to recognize the necessity for change, and that change can be good. Because change, I have discovered, with tanks on the streets and what have you, is too often judged out of fear rather than out of hope. And I think this room is full of people who judge change out of hope. But that is something that we have to make quite sure that we get across to all people right across the city. And what I need the partnership to help with more than anything is getting to all people. This will have been a great year if we have touched every school, every child, every neighbourhood, every part of Bristol in some way or other. I was in Brussels day before yesterday and speaking at an event that was held by Essen, who are one of the dozen candidates or so, I can't remember exactly, for the 2017 Green Capital. And they were asking me, is everybody now bought into Green Capital? I said, no, probably about 30%. But there are 60% who are soft targets in terms of being prepared to think about the benefits, but they're only prepared, that 60% are only prepared to think about the benefits. They see the direct benefits of health and wealth coming to them and to their families, to their schools, to their neighborhoods. So I think that's the big job we have to do, is make quite sure that it becomes real to people's lives, and it isn't a promise just a promise for the distant future, although that remains really important. So we need, between us, to build a consensus for change. And I think that will be by far the biggest legacy that we get out of this, if we have a city that is up for the change that is necessary. And I know so well that cannot come from the top. We do what we can, we enable, but actually the recognition of the need for change has got to come from right across the city, from every neighborhood and every community. And I think we need to make quite sure this year is that we do stuff that other people want to come and see and replicate, because this will have been a brilliant year not just for Bristol, but for Europe, if we are able to encourage the learning that we've had from our year to be spread to other cities. Now, I have to say, I'm fortunate, and I go out there, as some other people do here. I know that Martin has been to Minneapolis recently and got good feedback from that about what we're doing. Other people are talking about Bristol as a real shining light in terms of the level of ambition and the way we are celebrating green capital. In a way, maybe that some of the Copenhagens and the Stockholms didn't feel as such a necessity to do because they took it more in their stride. I want us to have a bit of a sense of panic about making sure that we achieve what we've set out to achieve. And I want to make quite sure that we all lead by example as far as is possible. And that is the city leading by example. We see the universities leading by example, but each of us as individuals. But what really, really matters is that trajectory that I talked about at the opening, is where are we going to be in 50 years' time? And then working back, where are we going to be in 2020, 2030, 2040? And how we create the steps to get there. And I believe that that's got to be a partnership between the city and you and all those who who are able to make the change in Bristol. The city have to be involved. We hold on to the big issues that are necessary, onto transport, which I would like to see government devolving to us so that we can have control. So the bigger political issues come into play. The whole one of devolving powers more locally, because we cannot deal with the issues while all the strings are being pulled from the centre. Transport, food, air quality, energy. Energy, we're setting up our own energy company. That's going to be transformational. And I'm hoping that the profits from that, much of the profit from that isn't reinvested in making quite sure that we're renewing our energy in the best possible fashion, which we're doing with wind and solar, and hopefully eventually with a lagoon in the Severn Estuary or two. I want to make quite sure that we recycle the profits, so we create a virtuous circle so that we reinvest in the social and environmental issues in Bristol. And this has got to be as much about the social as it is about the environmental issues, coming from Noel West, as I did this morning, where I was talking about employment and the opportunities that this whole agenda gives for an area of Bristol that has had 3 or 4 generations of deprivation and a lack of hope. I see this as an opportunity to give hope to some of those hard-to-reach areas. So that trajectory is really important. I want to involve you, and I want to involve a proper cross-section of Bristol in deciding what that trajectory will be. And so I've asked Barry McRory and Stephen Hilton to call a meeting in order to create the means of us going forward and seeing that we make quite sure that the investment that we manage to get into the city is used in the best possible way, and that the priority is quality of life. It's about a livable city, about a healthy city, and the people who are going to make the change more than anybody that's in this room are the children whose future depends on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Ferguson and Liz, for that indication of the direction of travel, and stressing just how important it is for each of us within the partnership and that important role that we each have to play. So before I call on the next speaker, with those in the back of the room, do you want to come and take... There's plenty of seats over here if you want to find somewhere a bit more comfortable. So next, I'd like to introduce Andrew Garrard, Chair of Bristol 2015, who will update us on how activities taking place during the special year will act as a springboard for this transformational change that we all seek.
Well, that was a good strapline. That wasn't in the brief, but I'll do my best. Several people have, just before I start, several people have asked me about my haircut. So to stop anybody else having to ask, I'll just tell you all. I have had rather a dramatic haircut. I was caught in a hailstorm on Coronation Road on my bike outside a barber. So I took refuge in the barber, and this is the result. So I'm in a mobile, lightweight situation now. Right. I've been trying to move away from PowerPoints because I know the grown-up way, as you've just seen, is to do it without, but I seem to have been forced back into the situation here. I've been asked to talk about just two things, really. One, about what we've done so far this year, just to bring you up to date. And a lot of you will know that. And secondly, to talk a bit about legacy. I must say I would quite like to have a philosophical discussion about what we mean about legacy, and I think we've had some of that already, but that's not really my brief here. So, what have we done just in the calendar so far? January activity, we started with turning the suspension bridge green, which we're told 6,000 people saw, though we're not sure how many of those 6,000 people realized, since it was New Year's Eve, what the reason for it being green was, but we hope a number did. The 110 grants which we organized at the back end of last year became live, and then we started the real year on the 23rd of January with two opening events. And actually for me, although the spectacle was a spectacular thing, intentionally, and I'll come back to that in a moment, for me, the smaller event, which I think a lot of you attended in the Victoria Rooms, was actually much more important, because I felt that it brought a lot of people back together again. We have had some complications, I think you could say, during 2014, and I thought the spirit of the opening event in the Victoria Rooms and the Saturday following, I found very, very encouraging and refreshing, and had very much the right spirit. So the grants, they became live, and I wanted just to send a few moments on those, because the good news is that they were very oversubscribed, demonstrating there's a lot of enthusiasm for this sort of activity. The bad news, of course, is they were very oversubscribed, and so there were lots of people disappointed. And I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again now. We haven't just said, well, bad luck. We have actively been pursuing other funds to meet that quite substantial appetite for funding. And I hope in the fairly near future, we will be able to report some good news on that front. But I don't want to raise expectations too far. But we haven't just left it. We have continued to act quite aggressively in trying to find some more money. So we had the opening event. And I wanted just to mention this, and I'll come back to it in a couple of places. Why did we do this? We did this partly, in fact, to a large degree, because of conversations I'd had with Copenhagen and with Hamburg and with Stockholm. And they all said the same thing, that they wished they had started the year with something which was spectacular or did raise interest publicly about the fact that they were European Green Capital. And in fact, towards the end of the year in Copenhagen, they were quite disappointed at how few people really knew that they were even the Green Capital at the end of the year. So this was an intentional thing on advice of the previous Green Capitals, just so that the people of Bristol would be aware that they were Green Capital. And now, coming from an engineering rather than a comms background, to me that's quite a surprising thing, but I'm getting to grips with that, and it is an important thing. So we did that in January. And I hope a lot of you saw it, because it was quite good fun. In February, we started with the hackathon, again, my first hackathon, where you seem to lock a whole lot of, early 20-year-old men in a room for 48 hours and then come back and see what they've done. It's quite a curious event. But they started with 12 teams down to 6 teams who are now continuing for 3 months to create some apps along at least one of the 5 themes of the year. Now, this may seem a sort of slightly tangential thing, but I think actually brings together some quite interesting parts of Bristol. So it brings together the digital industry, the creative industry, and the green industry all together in one thing, which who knows what will come out of that. But it was the beginning of the Green Tech Festival element of the year. Then we've got some other things there, which I won't go through them all, but I think the Go Green launch was also important, so that happened early February. And we got, I think, 350 or 400 companies coming to the launch. This is at least one mechanism which we're using to get to the non-green parts of Bristol. And I think last time I spoke to you, I think, was in the cricket club, when I said that to a large extent, no, it wasn't, it was in a school. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That in a way, you're the least interesting people for us, because you're already there. And George has said it and Liz has said it. I think the big challenge we've got, and I don't think we're doing a very good job at it yet, the biggest challenge we have is to get out to all the other people. Now, those other people will be communities, but they can also be businesses, industries, organizations. So one of the initiatives is the Go Green launch. And the idea of that is that any or every business in Bristol could join in that and become greener. So that's a practical step of greening businesses, greening organizations in Bristol. Not terribly glamorous, but I think really very important. Oh yeah, well that is the hackathon. Then next step, 2 weeks ago, we launched the so-called lab, which is a public space next to the office. And this was deliberately over half term. And 2 weekends either side of half term. And this was an open space for people to come in and see things that were going on. So we had probably 2 or 3 things every day in there. And this, quite a modest step, first of all, because it was the first week. But I think this is really a very important thing, and also an important thing for I hope, for you, because it's a perfect place for demonstrating what people are doing. And as Liz said, I think we've often repeated this, we're doing a few things. The 2015 company is doing a few things. But really, the whole point of this and the strength of what's going on, and the reason why we got the award in the first place is not because of the things that we're doing, but because of all the other things that are already going on. And I very much want you all, and others, not part of the Green Capital Partnership, but particularly the Green Capital Partnership, to come and tell the city what's going on, what you're doing, how you're doing it, practical experience. And I spent the weekend in there last weekend, 2 days in there, and I've lived a fairly rarefied life. And most people I've talked to in my professional life have got PhDs, or they've got huge amounts of money to lend to projects. So, and it sounds funny, but for me to meet the public is quite a big step. and it's a terribly important one for all of us, for our company, I think, for you and for the green movement. And the sorts of questions you get asked, of course, are not the questions you're expecting. But I would really, really like to urge all of you to come. We can fix up. Savita is somewhere here. There she is. So she's organising this part of our activity. I really want you to talk to her, fix up a time where you can demonstrate to the public whatever you're doing, whatever your passion is, and also particularly something for children. So this is an important step, I think, for the company, for the organisation, to start to have at least a limited public space where we can have that dialogue. And of course, we can have meetings and other discussions in there as well. And we're just over the bridge from the Architectural Centre as well. Going on through the week, through the month rather. Again, you can read those. This week, though, we have had, I think every day this week, we had some sort of feature on the BBC. So we've had some Points West and the the local television and radio, but also the World Service and the national BBC. And tonight there is going to be any questions from the university here as part of the Cabot effort. And so this week we actually have received a lot of interest and coverage in the press generally. Oh, I better get on. Fog Bridge, I hope a lot of you saw Fog Bridge, and here it is. Fog Bridge was just outside the public space that we've got in the lab. And I must say, I was worried about this. You know, was this the right thing for us to be doing? And as I mentioned, as you all know, my background is engineering. I'm a bit surprised to be responsible for something which is spending money on arts, but I'm well guided by that. And it's been a very... My brother's a sculptor, so I should know a little bit about it. But what I found with this was very, very interesting. I lurked about at the bottom of this bridge during the weekend in the fog and listening to what people were saying. And I was worried that they might be saying, what on earth is this? This is a complete waste of time. That wasn't at all what was happening. There was a huge amount of people coming across the bridge, and they were actually talking about what does this mean? What's the point of this? Oh yes, it's about the changing weather, about your perception. And it really was stimulating a lot of discussion about the right sort of things. And there's been a huge increase in attendance at the Arnold Feeney next door as well. So this very much convinced me that we're spending about 15% of the budget on art. We've been given some money by the Arts Council, so that's not unreasonable. But I was really struck by the success of that. Current activity. So again, I won't read through all of that, but that's what's going on right now. I want to just pick out the Do 15 in 15. So we're going to have a consumer campaign launched shortly, which is asking people to do 15 things in 15. It could be anything. One of mine is going to be, if I can get the app to work, to spend 15 Bristol pounds every week. At the moment I can't spend any because I cannot get the app to work, but I'm sure there are plenty of people who can help me with that. I've got some real ones, but not digital ones. And again, some more things going on there. Right, so turning to the legacy, I want to just remind you what the objectives are of this year, because they may not be the obvious things you would think of. There are several different objectives. And the first is to do something locally, local empowerment. But the second thing is sustainability leadership and putting Bristol on the map. And George has already referred to that. But revealing what's going on in Bristol in terms of local entrepreneurship, intellect, business, industry in the green area. So those two things are sitting together side by side. And frankly, there's a natural tension between them. So the people who may well say, why are you spending all this money on trying to get inward investment and new jobs and technology? You should be doing local things, full stop. Others might take a different view. But actually, we've got all three, and also the international reach. And we've got these key organizations. You've seen this loads of times before, but I think in terms of legacy, this is pretty important. The bit in the middle, which I'm the chair of, is gone in a year's time. And we've over and over again we put up this slide, but I think it's a very important slide. And George has also referred to the importance of the Green Capital Partnership as a legacy organisation. I think quite a lot of you will know that I've personally spent really quite a lot of time and energy getting these three organisations together. They are now all together in the same room, working together. And I think that's been quite an important step in the last 6 months or so, and I believe that actually is part of legacy. So I've listed some things here, and this is maybe some of this is a bit banal, but I think it is legacy. But the first one, you can say this in all sorts of different ways. Other people have said happier, healthier city, more, but you can say, and however you say it sounds a bit pious, I think. But the fact is that I've now become convinced after the last 6 months of my activity that really the legacy of 2015 is lots and lots of people making probably quite small changes in their lives. And the aggregation of lots of small changes is quite a big change, and it also brings with it a change in the way people are thinking, the way families are thinking, children are thinking. So it's very hard to put that down in a really sensible and cohesive way, but I do believe that is probably the biggest thing. We've also heard a bit about the universities doing the same thing. So more tangible ones, the National Schools Programme, so getting to the children at a very early stage with this sustainability message, I think is terribly important. We are now working with Aardman and Shaun the Sheep, and we've employed a school teacher and a project manager to develop a very comprehensive curriculum for primary schools, which will be a long-lasting legacy. The Go Green I've mentioned, I hope that will also be a long-lasting legacy for industry and business. The Bristol method is what we're calling the assessment of all the things that we're doing in this year. That will be a long-lasting legacy in the sense that it can be then taken to other cities in the UK and in Europe. And of course, the outcomes of these 110, maybe it's going to be 120 projects, they're not supposed to be just flashes in the pan of 120 nice things going on over Bristol during the year. They're meant to be things that do change the way people behave, do change the way people think, do change people's communities. And of course, there at the bottom, I've got the business side of it all. On the right-hand side, some more specific things that are happening, but leading down to the bottom right-hand corner of COP21. We haven't said much about COP21, but a lot of the things that we're doing in the year are meant to be leading to a message to deliver to Paris in December, from Bristol as a city, but then maybe from Bristol as a representative city, and maybe working with other cities. That's something which we are planning right now. Getting involved, so the lab I've already mentioned, and Savita is ready to take bookings, and we really, really want you to do that, adding your events to the calendar and volunteering. I want to make this point very clearly. We are not trying to run a year. There's 15 of us, or maybe 20 of us from time to time. What can we do to run a year? We can't do that. What we're doing is organising some specific events during the year to organise some specific activities like the strategic grants and going to COP21. The Bristol 2015 company is not a think tank. It's an organisation to deliver things during the year. The think tank is you, and actually to some extent our board. So what we have to do is get everybody else to be involved. So your involvement, everybody else's involvement. So we want everybody's involvement. In fact, I would say we need everyone's involvement. So it's really important that we all get together. And I would love to see our website burst with activity after this, but knowing what you're all doing, not just activities, but also your organizations and other things. So getting involved, us getting involved with you, you getting involved with us. We are only a temporary company. There's a limited number of us, and we're only here for a year. So we need to be working with everybody else. So this is what you can do. Now, I've got a little film, but I don't know if you're going to let me say it. Probably not. Yeah, so I won't show this film, but there's a little film which we're showing to other people, which I thought you should all see. It's on our website, and it's a boy talking about the city. But I've talked myself for too long, so the little boy will have to get out of the way. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. I think that's testament to it being an incredibly busy and exciting year. So next I've got Liz coming up because she's going to get everyone in the room to do some work this afternoon. So over to you, Liz.
I promise I'll be brief, and we'll show the film, I think, at 5:30 if anyone's got time to stay on afterwards. So I think the long and short of all of that is that there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done for this year, but very, very importantly in terms of this next conversation, there's a lot to be done to move into that much bigger, much deeper, lasting change space that we want to be in. I mentioned earlier on about a kind of growing up phase. It's interesting how many things in this room and how many things in the city have been birthed, if you like, through the partnerships. Really quite humbling how often people come up to me and say, my project wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for a meeting that I went to, or a small grant that you gave me a few years ago. So an awful lot has been birthed, but in a funny kind of way now that we're independent and we're having to stand on our own 2 feet. There's almost a risk that we've diluted our efforts in the sense that all of that strength has gone out into the city, which is fantastic and all we'd want to see. But actually, we need to also spend some time making sure that partnership is also there in the long term to help more of those things be birthed and more of those opportunities to be born. I think slightly like we've been in a kind of slightly extractive industry when it comes to the partnership, and perhaps we need to move into a renewable energy system, I think might be an appropriate way of looking at our a new way of being. So we're going to ask you to have some conversations, and the guys are going to come around with some big sheets for you to write on your tables. Move around the tables, do feel free to do that. That we wanted to look at those three areas that I very briefly touched on earlier. The details of it will be on your table, so I don't want to go through too much now because you've been incredibly patient. But those three areas, once again, are the first key role for the partnership being about active engagement and network support. How can we actively engage the unengaged? How can we use every person who's part of the partnership, every person who's in an organisation that's part of the partnership, as an army, if you like, to deliver that very, very important goal? How can we connect up local activity? How can we provide opportunities? We've listed some of the things that we'd like to be achieving and some of the ways we'd like to deliver them. We want you to be having some conversations about, are these the right sorts of services for the partnership? Are they the right sort of things that will help you to build a legacy in the activities that you do? So the first one there is engagement and some opportunities and ideas about how we might deliver those. The second one is about capacity building. How can we support and bring in some of those smaller networks? How can we nest some of them underneath the umbrella of the partnership so that we can broker more things together, that we can save precious resources and make more of them? How can we can support more collaborative projects in an active way by collectively going after some of those resources that we need to take these things forward? And finally, and really importantly, that sort of sectoral leadership voice. It's interesting to me, actually, and there are some good examples of it in this space. That, you know, recently we've had some really interesting controversy around what's happening around the M32. Now, most of the people involved in that on every side were part of the partnership. Everybody from the campaigners campaigning for the trees through to the people trying to organise the bus route. That is a fantastically exciting, if sometimes slightly daunting, place to be as a partnership. But isn't that an opportunity, if we can use this as a sectoral leadership space, to be bringing some of that difference together, to be acting differently, to challenge, like we said at the beginning of the thing, challenge the way that we do things, the how of what we do, not just the where and the what. How can we bridge conflicts? How can we bring together actions and make more sense of them? And can we provide some opportunities, some physical opportunities, some communication opportunities to bring together some of that leadership wisdom in the city in a much more strategic way to become much more than the sum of our parts? That is the most hackneyed phrase in the world, but I'm going to leave it hanging there. So let's think about those three roles, and we've got a few questions for you to think about at your tables. Is the principle of collaboration and partnership the model we want to pursue in this city? Is that the ultimate model that we want to pursue to really create a different city in the future? Are we starting from the right place? If so, are these three overarching roles the right ones for this city's green partnership? Is engagement and capacity building and sectoral leadership voice the key roles? If not, tell us what is, because we need to make sure we're going in the right direction this year, because it's going to be a huge development year for the partnership. If those are the right roles, are these the sorts of services and mechanisms that would best fulfill those roles? Which ones are most useful to you as partnership members, as activists, as businesses? Which ones are those most useful to you? And are there other roles that we could and perhaps should be fulfilling that are missing? Always remembering that we have to be resourcing those roles as well. How might these services enable you to achieve your own legacy goals? Have a conversation on your tables. What is it that you want to achieve out of this year? How could some of these opportunities that the partnership might be able to provide, how could they help you achieve more than you would on your own? And do you have examples of how these sorts of partnership services have helped your organisations? I could point around the room and get 25 people to stand up now and tell me some of the things that the partnership's already done for them. But what sorts of examples of specific opportunities has the partnership provided? Or where has a lack of some of these services in the past been a barrier to you achieving what you want to achieve? We'd love you to have that conversation for the next half an hour or so. I just wanted to flag a couple of things while you're at it. Do feel free to come and go to move around, go to a different table, grab yourselves a cup of tea. There are a couple of people both taking photographs and filming. We should have mentioned at the beginning, but we forgot. If you object to being filmed, please do tell us. We'd really like you, if you do have an opportunity, if somebody comes up to you with a camera, to do a quick piece to camera about what opportunities you would like to see in the future and what your idea about legacy is. And finally, The 2015 team will be over here in this corner here with lots of information about the 2015 year and ways to get involved, including the lab space and the volunteer space and all of those other things that Andrew mentioned. So please do feel free to come and go and have a chat with them. There are a couple of people as well from Bristol Green Week who haven't got a table, but they're here and they would really love to hear what activities you'd like to put into this year's Bristol Green Week. I think that's about it for now. I'm really sorry that it's gone on a bit, but half an hour at least for some really good, productive conversations about where we go from here. Thank you very much.
Dave Hunter. Okay, thanks, Gary. I was asked to say a few words about how I got involved in Green Partnership and how it feels to me at this moment on the journey. I'm involved in a couple of local organisations who've got quite a long-established relationship with the partnership. One of those that Liz alluded to before. One of them is the Community Farm, which is a community-supported agriculture project based in the Chew Valley, and which is all about connecting people with the food they eat and the land that it comes from. And also the Bristol Pound, CIC, which is giving the city a very visible way to express its values and support the local economy. And both of those have, as I say, sort of been involved with the partnership over a number of years. I'm also one of the directors of the Green Capital Partnership, CIC, and I'm just going to sort of explain why I think the partnership is important and what I think, why I'm pleased to be being active in the work that it's doing. Liz and George both acknowledged that the role that the partnership had in getting us to becoming European Green Capital 2015. But I think it's critical, and I suspect everybody already understands that was in no way sort of job done, and it's very much a springboard for doing what we've been for many years wanting to do, and building on that and reaching out from here. So it feels like very much sort of the next phase of the journey, and I think critically sort of that is based on believing in the vision, which is up on this board. I don't know whether it's anywhere else over there. The low carbon city with a high quality of life for all, I think is a very simple message. It's a very universal message, and it's what has united over 750 organisations, incredibly diverse, public sector, private sector, civil society, academic institutions, big businesses, sole traders, small enterprises, all behind this vision, and what makes the partnership quite distinct and unique. The partnership's not about what's in it for us, or not exclusively what's in it for us. I think a lot of the other sort of membership organisations and network bodies in the city, quite rightly, that is the focus. But again, what's different about the partnership, I think, is it's much more about what can we do together for the common good, and I think that's really important in what we're going to be doing both over the rest of this year and going beyond it. There's been quite a bit to talk about change, and again, I think the role the partnership can play in that change is very distinctive and very significant. Many of the members, many of you of the partnership, many of you here are already delivering change in many ways, and I think what the partnership can add is that sort of overview, that systemic perspective, potentially looking at what's going on across the hundreds of organisations and putting people together, seeing where there are synergies, seeing where there's opportunities to create more, and communicating that and sharing that learning and creating something that is, as Liz said, greater than the sum of the parts. And I think most of all, is what I'm fascinated by is the fact that the partnership is not distinct from us. The success of the partnership is very much our success, and there's no way of separating those two things out. So with some of the things like the challenges around how we're reaching out beyond the membership, how we're getting into those other parts of the city, effectively we can't look to others to do that. It's got to come from within. It's got to come from understanding who is good at that. How can we help them to deliver that? How can they help us to understand how to deliver that? And I think that collaboration is at the heart of everything the partnership can offer, and hopefully what we will be achieving during this year and beyond.
Thank you very much, Dave. Patrick.
Hello, folks, and apologies for sort of drifting out and drifting back in again, but we just had a great big burst water main, and I know how I'm going to be spending my night, because I'm on duty standby for the sort of senior manager rota. So, yes, incident called, all that kind of stuff. It kind of makes the point, actually, about how important water is for a city, and it's one thing that we've got a number of different partners working on the Green Capital Water Action Group, one of whom is a guy called Chad Stadden, who is a university professor at UWE. And he says, if you want to understand a society, follow water. And it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. If you want to understand how something is working, look at water. Look at where it goes. And it's not just about how people are using water within a city, but it's also how we relate to water. It's how we think of water. Because there's kind of a couple of different markets we're looking at here. There's a couple of different things. One is the smart stuff about how a modern city works, and about all of the infrastructure, about all of the looking at the arteries of a modern city. And this is the future city stuff that Liz was talking about. This is the looking at your assets and infrastructure. But then there's the other huge side of water, which is that every city in the world, in one way or another, is built around water. And as a result, we've all got an enormous link to it. It's not just about what we get coming out of the tap and how we throw it away. It's also the fact that we have an enormous link with the water that waters the garden, with the water that falls on us when we are cycling into work, and with the water that flows through the city in watercourses. So there's a couple of quite specific strands that we're taking on the Water Action Group. One is on the smart cities idea. And this is looking at the quite technical approach. We've got some quite technical members of the Water Action Group, engineering organisations, consultancies, environment agency, universities. And with that, we're looking at how you make visible what's going on with water in a city. What makes a city interesting for water? And this is all about bringing information in to say, we've got a great project going on with University of West of England at the moment with the Student Village. It's a complete one-off. There's nowhere else in the world where this is happening. And with this, we're studying the water use. But that information itself is useless unless you start looking at how you start changing behaviours. Chris mentioned earlier on First Things First. Students are such a powerful voice for future change. These are the future professionals. These are, apart from anything else, an enormous population of the city. So if we can make things interesting and relevant to that sector, then we can get information across about how, if you change your behaviours, you change what's using water. So that's the technical stuff. We're bringing a lot of data through into one place. We're showing how things can be changed. But then there's the stuff about how we all actually link with water and how we're all interested in water. And one of the big things we're looking at is Bristol's watercourses. Now, one of the suggestions that gets made quite a lot is, well, I just open up the watercourses. Now, that is a brilliant idea. It's a brilliant endpoint. It's also hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds to do it, because you're talking about rewiring the whole of a city's communication infrastructure, totally changing the way that traffic moves throughout a city. That's not where you start. Where you start is by getting people connected and interested to what's going on in their backyard. So the project that we're looking at specifically, and the one that I would ask actually for all of you to, if you've got something with a local watercourse that you'll be interested in doing this kind of idea, to get back in touch with Vicky, who's central coordinator on all flows of information, because we're looking at getting local communities just interested in the local watercourse. A lot of these watercourses dive into culverts and they're not seen for miles, so they're invisible. So we're just looking at doing some water walks as to where the water goes. So it dives down there, disappears at the end of my house. Where does it come out? Does it end up in the Froom? Does it come out in the floating harbour? Where does it go? Because once you can start getting people connected with that idea, then you gradually build a concept that actually a watercourse isn't just a ditch that, in some cases, this isn't a perfect city. George said, you make the best of what you've got. You don't claim to be absolutely fantastic. You make the best of what you have. And yeah, we've got many watercourses where people dump rubbish. Once people start to get a feel for the fact that actually that's a little local habitat for all sorts of important stuff, it's just going to be that bit less likely. And those are the, Andrew said, this is the least interesting bunch of people in Bristol to engage with on this subject, because we all get it. What we need to reach out to is the people who don't get it quite as much. And connecting people through water to their local environment is potentially going to be quite powerful on that. And that's me. Thank you.
The mic's obviously at a better height for me, Patrick. Richard's now returned to the room. Thank you, Richard. So Richard's going to say a few words as a final of our three speakers, and then I'm going to invite Thomas, Matt, and Chloe up to do the song. So I hope you guys are ready. Yeah, good. Richard, yeah.
Cheers. Right. All right. Hello. Thanks very much. Yeah. So it's really quite an honor to speak to all of you, and I'm not going to be able to do this much longer, but I'm going to speak a little bit as sort of a pseudo outsider in terms of viewing all of the exciting things that have been going on. Because as you know, the Cabot Institute has been very strongly involved with the partnership. Certainly through Philippa Bailey, who was involved with the partnership from very, very early days, and of course was co-director. But also lots of academics have been involved. There's all sorts of people from the Cabot community who are in the room and such, and all sorts of interactions. And that gave me the luxury as Cabot director to just have a little bit of a step back, support all the people doing the interesting things, and just watch as this amazing thing developed and grew, and see that. Now I said pseudo outsider because I've met more and more and more all of you all the time, and this is just this to me is the most exciting and probably the most important thing that has happened before, during, and after 2015. This is where the action will be. This is where the legacy will be. This is where the real fundamental deep change will happen. And so there's no way I'm going to stay as a pseudo outside perspective. And this will be my last chance to sort of say, here's what I think of as my hopes and ambitions from some of the conversations I've had with you over the past couple of months and what I've seen today. And I think there's two ways I look at it. One is as in the Cabot Institute and a member of the university, and the other as a citizen in the city. And I think with the first, the obvious value that this provides to us is that not only are you all a partnership, but you're a collective, and that is fantastic for both University of Bristol and UWI as a way to facilitate our interaction with a wide, diverse, amazing group of people and a group of organizations. We're actually, as a gateway, it's fantastic. Now, I know previous speakers, and I very much appreciate this, have said nice things about how the University of Bristol is hosting it, creating the space, and all the ways that we've interacted and such. But let me just say unequivocally that the University of Bristol is as proud as I am of our students, as proud as I am of our academics, and proud as I am of many people. We are not doing enough with this city. And the partnership is a really exciting opportunity about that. Unfortunately, Martin Bigg had to leave, and I said, that's what I'm going to say. Can I say the same thing on behalf of UWI? And he said, say two things, Rich. And you said, first of all, that this year has already been an amazing catalyzing opportunity, not in terms of how we work with you, but how UWI and University of Bristol are working together. That's really exciting for us. And you said, and yes, you can say that as much as they've achieved, they think we can do a lot more. So the partnership angle, that is what we can get out of it, and that's what we're really, really excited about. But I expect all of you to be challenging us throughout this year and in the coming years, saying more, always more, do more. This is an amazing city, you're an amazing university, UWI's an amazing university, do more together. The other reflection, and thinking more about the legacy, and a little bit more, and this is a bit more of the outside perspective, of perhaps pinning some of my own anxieties, hopes, dreams, aspirations on the partnership and what the legacy would be, is that in the Cabot Institute, we study things like food security, water security, energy security, global environmental challenges, these big picture challenges. And what I like about the partnership, of course, is that we're looking at the solutions to those, and that's very, very exciting. I think deep down, when I think about what is really the basis for addressing these challenges, what is the fundamental, what is at the foundation of how we need to change in order to address those challenges, it is that we have a disenfranchised and excluded population. Not everybody is invested in or even allowed to participate in our democracy, whether we're talking about the city, the country, the world. Certainly back in my home country, people are not, they are excluded by policies, they are excluded in terms of voter registration. There are so many things that keep people from participating in decision making. And that will not work if we want to solve these challenges. The scale of the challenges requires bold democratic mobilization. To make the types of changes that we were alluding to earlier today, you can do incremental change with 30% of the population voting. You do not change society with 30% of the population buying in. You must get everybody buying in. Second, you're going to have to make difficult decisions. All of us, we're going to have to make difficult decisions. And if you're going to make difficult decisions, we need to make compromise. If you're going to make compromise, you need buy-in. And if you want buy-in, you need participation. Everybody needs to feel that even if what they decided was going to happen, they at least had a voice. Now that I think is that sounds pretty ambitious, but all we need to do is look at Scotland. Look at Scotland, and George Monbiot was talking about this a couple of days ago. You ask a bold enough, big enough question, you will mobilize people. It is possible. We do not have an apathetic electorate. We have a disenfranchised electorate, and I think this community can be part of that. Now, I think, you might be looking and thinking, that's a rather big ask for a partnership. But actually, I think all of the things that Liz was talking about in terms of engagement, capacity building, all that, those are the nucleus for exactly what you want to achieve. I think when I look at I was writing down some notes before I came along, and I didn't realize how nicely they were going to map onto what Liz was talking about. I said, what can you do? You can support, incubate, foster the development of new things. So you can foster the development of of the organizations within here, but you can foster the development of new organizations and help them grow and help them thrive. New organizations all across the city, building capacity, that is how you mobilize people, and that's how you empower people. So I think, you're really doing this fundamental work. The other thing I wrote down is that it can be a forum for debate and discussion and conversation, which is effectively engage. There's engaging external people to the partnership. There's people bringing people into the partnership and using this as a very exciting space for conversation. And then the last one I put down with a couple of question marks, which is a political voice in and of itself. Well, we have talked about, several speakers talked about sectoral leadership. Well, sectoral leadership inevitably leads to a voice in the political conversation. And that is something that I think is very, very, very powerful. I think, to be honest, as I said, I'm pinning a lot of my hopes and dreams and aspirations and anxieties on this, and that may be a lot to ask. But actually, I think what the ambition is, this is the largest type partnership in the world. And every time I talk to anybody in it, you say, yeah, but there's so many people who haven't been brought in yet. There's so many other people. So clearly there is an ambition for this to be a force for inclusion and empowerment. And at the end of the day, that's what democracy is about. Inclusion, empowerment, and bringing people along for the ride. So no one else is going to fill that gap. So why not you? Or actually, as I was saying, why not us? Now, I did write down one last thing here, which is the pragmatic bit, and that's alluding to what Gary was saying. You need the resource. You're going to have to support yourselves from within, but external people have to support, whether it's the council, whether it's the universities, whether it's the wealthy members, but you guys need resource, we need resource, and I, for whatever small little voice I have in the university or small little voice I have in the city, I will do everything I can to say, resource this, give them the funding to make it work, and good luck and have fun. Right, all right, so that's me, thank you.
Richard, thanks for coming back and sharing those thoughts with us. Thank you very much indeed. So look, I've got to thank a few people. Let me do this before we move to the music. All our speakers and contributors, thanks again to all of you. Everybody in the room for taking part in this discussion. I'm sure that you recognize that we're starting a very important discussion today. And there's lots of seriousness in that, but we also want to make some fun in it. We will enjoy it all much more if we do that. You've been brilliant to stay with us on a Friday afternoon doing this. I'm enormously grateful for your contributions. We're going to take the writing and thinking that you've done away, and we'll reflect that back with you, and we'll keep this conversation going with as much energy and animation and passion, of course, as we all need to bring to it. Plenty of people have volunteered to help us again today and all the time, actually. Really grateful for all your support on that. Thank you to one or two businesses that have helped us. Copper Consultancy have been great at doing some design work for us over the last few days. Thank you very much. Amy Walsh, who's the Get Green coordinator, Eva Martino, all the students here, Ecomedia, the list goes on. Of course, my valued colleagues at 2015, thank you very much for your support and help with this. We'll be doing more of these during the year. We'll definitely do one in May. Vicky wrote that we're going to do one in August. Not sure about that. Everybody might be away. We'll work out when that one is, and definitely one in November. Finally, the music. All right, so Thomas Stewart-Jones, Matt Harvey, and Chloe Udden, where are you? Here you go. So here's the story, guys. Come on up. Yeah. Luckily, you can come on the stage. Don't leave me standing up here. Luckily, I'm not playing the piano because I can't. So here's their little story. They got in touch with the partnership about a Kickstarter campaign that they were doing that currently has 132 backers with £10,500 raised so far. It's a new musical for amateur groups telling the story of a community encountering some of the questions and issues around peak oil as transition is. Everyone knows the transition movement, don't they? Thank you. I assumed you would. It'll be written for schools, amateur dramatic groups, and transition groups, of course, any group that wants to get involved with it. And I did ask if I'm allowed to do this. They're going to tell us about a swimby. That's a new term for me. Yep. Something wonderful in my backyard. Yep. You've got to love that, haven't you? They're going to do the performance for us. I don't know what they're going to do because I haven't seen it either. And then if you want to hang around for the next half an hour, keep saying hi to each other. If not, enjoy your weekends. And thank you very much indeed for your time, energy, passion, and intellect this afternoon. Thank you again.
Firstly, I just want to say thank you so much for having us here. This is just the most wonderful group of people to share this with. And of course, we will be telling some of the stories of people in this room. We're in the story collection phase of our project at the moment, and there's some flyers up on the table over there. So if you have any stories about your involvement in the transition to our low carbon future, that would be fantastic if you'd share those with us. We worked with Matt over the last 18 months to produce this book, The Element in the Room. You may know Matt from Radio 4 fame, and you may know him from having seen him at Bristol Green Week or other festivals, and I'm going to hand over to him in a second. But before I do that, I just want to say a personal thanks. We do have 132 backers for our project so far, and two of them that I know of are in this room. Susie Hewson, where are you? Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And also Angela Raffle, thank you so much for supporting our project so far. It's really great.
Okay. So I'm Matt. I'm mainly a poet. I now write musicals. With my friend Thomas Stewart-Jones, who's a proper composer, like real life composer. Credentials, former BBC Young Composer of the Year. Worth a woot, worth a spontaneous, ironic, absolutely. Absolutely. Obviously his career's gone downhill since then, but he's still working, which is really good. He and I have written a song cycle. We've written a song cycle, a proper musical. We wrote Rumpelstiltskin in Bath. And his most recent commission, it's so good, he's been commissioned to write music for the championship, the football championship. Really proud. I assume it's a football championship because Thomas didn't even ask. He just quoted and accepted the work. Okay, so he's got credentials. We feel a bit bashful because, strictly speaking, we haven't even started writing it, but we have got some music in process to bring. We're going to have at least 1 minute, what we think is the opening minute of the show, whose stories we're still kind of getting. And just we want to show you the kind of process by which it came out. This residency produced poetry. Chloe had this idea of a song cycle arising out of the poems. Thomas was going to write the music, and she kind of bypassed the song cycle and said, write us a musical. Transition Town, the musical. I laughed. He laughed, but we said yes. I actually ran it by Rob Hopkins because I was a bit bashful about doing it, and Rob laughed, but in a good way. And I just a tiny taste of the kind of poetry I was writing. I was writing lots of long, wonderful, rambling stuff, and Regen Southwest were going, "Oh, Matt, that's really long." And so, can you do more pithy? And I was writing. My pithiest poem had quite a long title. It was called "A partially submerged person in Somerset makes an implicit link between extreme weather conditions and climate change, whilst hoping the latter may be mitigated by investment in renewable technologies." It's a cracking title. And the poem goes, "I want to go renewable, so my streets are less canoeable." It's quite strong stuff. Anyway, I was writing some of the pieces with a view to them being set to music. And here's one particular one, which I'm going to read you kind of part of the poem. And we've only just started setting this. I thought it would be fantastic to have this part of the argument about renewable energy set to a country and western song, because I'm really creative. Thomas has never written country and western music before, but he's up for anything. I think Chloe mentioned that we wanted to try, the arts program was to involve people, make it participatory arts. We actually thought about getting you to sing. Then we backed away from that idea. I'm saying this so you know how bad it could have been for you. Instead, this country, I'm going to read you first as a poem, and then then Thomas will demonstrate what he's done with it as a possible prototype song for the musical. And I'm saying it to Susie, and I think it's Angela, it's going to get better than this. Okay, this is really early doors. Just really trust us. So what I'd like you to do, it's called Pie in the Sky, okay? It's a country and western poem at this stage. Every so often I want you to go, yee-haw, like that, okay? Now, there's no particular place for doing it. I'm just going to trust you to join in a participatory way, thinking that, obviously the more you join in, the better it'll be in the long run for the planet. Or maybe that's hubristic, I don't know. Okay, so imagine, I think this scene is going to take place in the big village hall, the big debate about renewable energy. Put a saddle on a sunbeam, hang a bridle on a breeze, ride the tide into the future land of possibilities. Thank you. Trust yourselves. They tell me if you want that kilowatt, you've got to frack and drill a lot. And then, of course, you spill a lot. And when I ask them why, they say don't let them tell you. Otherwise, those greenies tell a pack of lies. When will you people realise it's all just pie in the sky? Yeah. Nice. Well, slap my thigh, pie in the sky, hidey hi and hody ho. It's the high wide sky pie rodeo. And I say, if the sky can provide G, that's kind of nice of it. If there's pie in the sky, cut me a slice of it. Yeah. Nice. Serve me up a plateful, I'll be glad and I'll be grateful. Earth, water, wind and fire are my dream team. Let's tap the toing and the froing, bag the beaming and the blowing, milk the movement of the ever-flowing stream. Yeah. And so on. It's a fantastic poem. There's more to it. I think I'm going to stop there because that's a real taste of it. It's a real taste of it. And Thomas, I was on the phone to him last night and he was going through, I think it could go like this, Matt.
So when Matt said we were doing country and western, I said, do we have to? But then actually, I thought, actually, it's not too hard because all you have to do is go like this. Got some sound? Oh, it doesn't matter. All right, okay.
He can't work under these conditions. It's just
well, practice
it's a proper
the yeehaw.
composer.
So when we get, it's all just pie in the sky, can you go yeehaw again like you did before? So it's all just pie in the sky, yeehaw. Great, okay, cool. And I'm going to attempt to sing it. I'm not a singer, but so all you have to do to do the country western is this. You get country and western. So here we go, something like this. So this is a very rough version of where we are. Put a saddle on a sunbeam, hang a bridle on a breeze, ride the tide into the future land of possibilities. They tell me, if you want that kilowatt, you've got to frack and drill a lot, and then of course you spill a lot, and then I ask them why. They say, don't let them tell you otherwise, those greedy tell a pack of lies. When will you people realize it's all just pie in the sky? Yeah! If the sky can provide, gee, that's kind of nice of it. If there's pie in the sky, then cut me a slice of it. Put a saddle on a sunbeam and a bridle on a breeze, ride the tide to the future land of possibility. Something like that, you know, it's very early.
Very good. Brilliant. I have to say, I just have to tell you, I sent the first 30 seconds of that to our local community college, and the head of performing arts played it to her musical theatre. You've got this musical theatre group, and they loved it. You might be surprised, but they loved it, and they want to perform. They're going to perform it at our launch, just on the basis of that. And they're going to do the first minute now. Thomas wrote 1 minute of music. He sends me lots of little things, and I said that minute, that could be the opening minute. So just play what you sent me.
So at the beginning of a show, you've got to have a really big opening number, and it was going to be something like, you know, a real. When you imagine it with all the band, it'll be really big. But something like this. Sounds like the Kellogg's advert, but it'll sound really good. Something like that, very arresting.
Okay, so we had that. So do I read the words? No, I think we just say what we did with it.
Oh, yeah.
So it had some words to it, so we decided this is where we start. The song now goes, here's where I was born and raised, right here is where home and hearth is, right here is where I spend my days, home is where the heart is. And there's 5 more verses like that, they're really good. This place is what made me me, here's where I was stirred and shaken, here's where they said I could be anything I wanted. Anyway, you're going to hear it now because he made a demo. Yeah, that's it. Home is where the heart is. You can see that's adaptable anywhere because wherever you are, that's where your home. Yeah. Anyway, something wonderful in my backyard. It's gonna be coming to a transition group near you.
It's the weekend. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thanks again to Thomas, Matt, and Chloe for that amazing talent in this partnership. We're looking forward to the performance at the next quarterly partnership gathering. If anybody would like to do that, contact Vicky. Oh, thank you. We're in. Thanks again, everybody. Good night.